Okay, I'm Christie Carson, and I'm talking today with Tom Bird. And his former position was as executive producer at the Globe Theatre, and he worked with the Globe to Globe Festival, which he set up, and also the World Tour of Hamlet. And both of those had kind of a digital afterlife, which I wanted to talk about. But first of all, Tom, can you tell me what your current position is? Because I don't remember
Yeah,
the title.
I'm executive director at York Theatre Royal.
Okay. And so if we start at the beginning and think about the Globe to Globe Festival, um, how did the digital element of that begin? Was it conceived from the beginning, or did it happen as things progressed?
It wasn't conceived from the beginning. It happened as things progressed. Um, oh gosh, let me try and remember. Okay, so I mean, we started talking about the Globe to Globe Festival in around the late summer, early autumn of 2010. I mean, which is so close to the actual festival, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But we that's when we started talking about the actual festival. And we started talking about it as though it was something that might happen when the Olympics gave us £500,000, which was very much towards it, not to pay for it. I mean, I can't remember how much it cost. I think it cost £4 million, maybe, the festival.
Wow.
Or maybe 2 million. And anyway, the Olympics gave us 500,000, which was like a contribution to it.
And just while we're on that, other people facilitated the rest of the money. I mean, they helped to pay for their own coming over, or did you fundraise, or how did it come
no,
about?
it's tickets, really. It was all ticket.
Really?
I mean, even though some of them actually, you look back and think, gosh, and I look back at the photos and think, gosh, quite a lot of people came, considering that was King John in Armenian. A lot of people showed up and came. We had some good kind of we sold a lot of tickets for a thing called a Yard Olympian, where we did it was £100 to see the whole festival. Yeah. So you got 37 plays, really, for under £3 a play. So that was very popular. And
well, since I was there for all of them, I got to know quite a few of those Olympians. And also, and one of the questions though was whether, because it was only £3 a play, whether people actually came to them all. But you gave a talk.
We have no way of checking.
Yeah, but you gave a talk at the end, as I recall, where a bunch of people came, and they were the hardcore. They definitely had been to everything.
Yeah, there was. I mean, anecdotally, there were a fair few people who came to everything, and some people blogged, their own kind of personal blogs on everything, as I'm sure you know.
So it started having a digital footprint even before a digital footprint outside of the official digital footprint, if you see what I mean.
It started having a digital life the minute we launched a website, I suppose, or announced it in a way. And I can't remember when we announced it, but really we were up and moving properly in the autumn of 2010, and we wanted to have a brochure by October, November 2011. So that was the kind of prep phase for the festival. And I mean, very, very late, really. The space, because the space wasn't around, it wasn't like the space was a thing that was sort of doing rolling commissions of cultural projects. It was set up at that time, and I think it was set up during 2011, but as a joint venture between the Arts Council and the BBC, and to cover culture digitally in an innovative way. And they needed some kind of flagship projects of ambition, and they came to us. Did they come to us? I think I mean, a guy called Peter Manura at the BBC was sort of instrumental, and he helped kind of push it along. And between him and Dominic Drumgoole and I, that's kind of what got it going. I
And
think,
was there any conversation at any point? Because when we talked about doing the book, I pitched the idea of just doing selective productions, and you went, "No, it's the whole festival or not
yeah,
at
yeah,
all."
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Did,
That
did
was
the same conversation
yeah,
happen with
exactly the
this?
same conversation
Okay,
happened. Exactly the same conversation happened because we were really conscious about the whole spirit of the festival was about us trying to say Shakespeare's not better in English than it is in Italian.
yeah,
Really, that was what we were trying to show, and in a way to kind of demolish that hierarchy, and people can judge how successful that was or not. But for that reason, we just very quickly adopted this kind of no favorites mentality, and that was a rule, actually. Incidentally, that was a rule of being at the Globe at the time under Dominic's leadership. It was like we weren't allowed. We were allowed to do pretty much anything, but we weren't allowed to have favourites. You could never get to the end of a season, a normal theatre season,
right.
and say, I liked Merry Wives of Windsor more than Timon of Athens. That just was the one thing that Dominic always said, no, you don't do that. You never do that. And even 3 years later, you weren't allowed to do that. But
Wow.
and I understand why really that was. It was about the organisation's support, especially as I run a theatre now. It was about the understanding that the organisation needed to support everyone equally to give it the best chance of success, and that the shows would be better in a no favourites mode. So anyway, yeah, the space almost certainly came to us with an idea to kind of partially cover the festival, and we
Yeah.
almost certainly, and I just say that because I can't exactly remember the conversations, said back to them, no, it's all or nothing. And they were really ambitious at the time. And what's interesting for me now is that the other major project they covered was York Theatre Royal's York Mystery Plays.
Oh, of course. Right.
So strangely, the two organisations at which I spent the vast majority of my working life,
Are
with
linked by
those
the
two,
space.
with those two big kind of seed commissions for the space in a way. So they came in at some point in 2011, but late-ish in 2011, to be
Yeah.
honest. I mean, we're
Yes.
talking 6 months before the festival happened.
I know. It's crazy.
And agreed to film them all. And then really there was a sort of genius man called Ian Russell, who has since become very prominent for different ways because he unfortunately his daughter died in those very tragic circumstances after looking on Instagram, and
Oh
Ian was the guy who campaigned for the social networks to change
yeah.
fundamentally, and has achieved something with Facebook anyway.
I mean, it's good to think about the good and bad side of the internet, and this is one of the things we're interested in and talking about is that well, basically the whole university sector, most of and all the schools have just been forced into this online, overnight teaching online, and that's a space that possibly the teachers are less comfortable in than the students are, and how to get to frame something of quality, which is obviously what the space was trying to do right from the beginning, for the students is something that I'm kind of interested in now, sort of retrospectively, because it was all happening all at once. And yeah, I was trying to get people from all over the world to come and see the shows, and so there was plenty to do, just getting the book and the festival and the space all done at the time. But we've had some time to think about it. And I guess the thing that really stuck with me with the whole festival was that sense of momentum that was building over the weeks, and that certainly was helped, I think, by having them sort of simultaneously streamed almost. It wasn't exactly simultaneous, but it was a few days
No,
later.
that's right. There was an excitement. There was an excitement when the show happened, and then there was a sort of this second moment of excitement sitting in our office, and a little bit of press around whenever the film came out, which would be 2 or 3 days later. And it was a good move, I thought, by again, it showed two organisations not known for moving quickly, the Arts Council and the BBC, moving incredibly quickly and in a very agile way. And that was thanks to Ian, really, I mean, and his company, Sparkly Light, who just, came up with the most extraordinary solutions, and just ran it brilliantly and turned the films around very quickly. And there was a guy called Hugh, whose second name I can't remember, but he sat in the Globe attic for a month and he edited the films straight away. The minute the imaginary curtain came down, he was editing those films, and he was and they were being pushed out so quickly, which was great.
Well, also, and I think what was nice was that we were then, when with the reviewing, the first reviews we were trying to get out onto your blog within a week as well. So you had this kind of, very quick afterlife, and then we had the book, which came out later, and then the films continued to be available at least until the end of that year. And so it was really this, if you missed it, there was that sense that, well, you can get something of it, even if it's not the whole thing. And people who came in sort of halfway through could go back and see things that had happened at the beginning. So it was a really, I think it was part of a bigger sort of digital snowball that happened all around the festival. Was that your sense of it? Or
it was I think it was a digital snowball is a really good way of putting it, because how long was the festival? It was about 6 weeks long.
6 weeks, but I remember very well.
When we started, it really gained a kudos. It didn't. It gathered snow.
Absolutely.
Through the thing, and that what I'm really sure about is that snow would not have been gathered without the digital side of it. So of course there's word of mouth, of course there are newspaper reviews, and whatever else. And a key thing, by the way, is that the Guardian agreed to review everything. The Guardian reviewed every show, and that was in a way a digital initiative before anything else, because they, this is Andrew Dixon, who's not there anymore either, but has since written a lot about Shakespeare in the wider world. Andrew was I think something like digital culture editor at the Guardian at the time.
I remember that.
And Andrew said, we'll review them all, which is phenomenal. And he
didn't personally review them all, though, did he?
No, he didn't. He got a team of reviewers. And what was quite interesting is he got a team of reviewers who because the scale of it was just not coverable by Guardian theatre reviewers. Michael Billington did about 4 of them, I think, and Lynn did a few, but beyond that, they had to move right across their whole kind of spectrum of kind of freelance, which
as did we,
music critics, you got music critics and comedy critics and that kind of thing, kind of reviewing different things, reviewers from all over the world, reviewers young and old. It was that was great. And Andrew committed to recording them all and to reviewing them all, and that really helped. And a combination of that digitally and the space meant that we started to really gather some momentum, I'd say quite early, because the first few shows were kind of landmark, and the South Africans were very good, the Maoris were very good, and a lot of people started saying, have you seen this? You should get down to the Globe. And by the end we were selling out, Shakespeare plays in
another language,
not very well spoken languages.
Well, I remember there being like a full 2-page spread of the Maori haka in I think it was the Metro or something like that. Something really unusual, where you just thought, these are not people who usually get excited about Shakespeare productions. So that was it was fun to be part of, definitely. And in terms of the academic response, both the book that I did and the one that I was involved with, that they did all of the Year of Shakespeare, where they did all of the World Shakespeare Festival events, unprecedented cooperation amongst academics as well. So that was, I think, in a strange way, the whole lockdown thing. I was saying that the last time that because there's so much streaming on at the moment, I'm having trouble deciding what to do. I was saying the last time this happened was during the 2012, where there was so much Shakespeare on that you really had to pick and choose and focus on what you were going to do. So I've decided I'm going back to the Globe to Globe, because it had a pretty profound effect on me.
Great.
Yeah, so I guess one of the questions I have is, and what we're going to ask other people who were involved in the responses to it, is whether or not it has had an afterlife beyond, it's gone on to the Globe Player, and we're trying to see whether or not it's being used in teaching. and whether it's changed people's sort of perspectives on, the type of Shakespeare that they're getting able to get their students interested in. Because again, sometimes it's not the fact that people don't want to look at, Shakespeare in Armenian, it's the fact that it's just not available, or people don't know that it exists. So, both Henry and I have examples where we've used clips from those particular productions in order to show particular things. I've been talking about contrasting the As You Like It from the RSC, which is very sort of, psychologically realistic, with the Georgian one, which was, incredibly sort of meta-theatrical, and beautifully so. It certainly wasn't, it was, and the poems, if you remember, were balloons that he let off, and it was absolutely gorgeous. So just giving, students the possibility to see that kind of whole spectrum of approaches. Do you have any anecdotal evidence about how they've been used, those films, and people's responses, or even people who brought students to the Globe? I know the Othello, I mean, what's weird for me is that the Othello, for example, there were loads and loads of students in that audience. And I went to the Craiova International Festival in 2018, and that, Othello came again. And we actually got the guys, two of the guys came to the conversation that we were having, because we were, it's now become almost a standard in festivals to be able to do that kind of viewing and reviewing simultaneously. So we put together a whole edition of Cahiers Elizabethan on that festival. But it was nice to be able to talk to those guys about having seen the Othello then, and seeing how, it went all over the world, and the festival has had other afterlives, going out into the countries, going back to those countries where they were being performed.
I mean, it really has. It's had a lot of amazing afterlives. I'm trying to think of. I think for some of those companies, for quite a few of those companies at the time, it was the first time that they'd had work filmed. I mean, there's not really a big culture. Certainly wasn't at the time a huge culture of filming theatre around the world. And I remember asking everybody, when it was clear the Space were coming on board to kind of digitize the whole thing, I remember sort of having to negotiate with everybody and say that how do you feel about this? How do you want to do it?
And nobody said no. That's it.
Well, no one said no but we were really asking about the capture.
Okay.
And we were doing it on a genuinely break-even basis. So, I mean, the Space were giving us the actual amount of money it cost to put the show on.
Right.
And I think, because we put in some kind of in-kind staffing support to help the filming happen, we agreed that we would share the proceeds of the films 50-50 with each company, I think.
Okay.
So
there were, at some point, you at least discussed with me the possibility that they were being broadcast and that sort of thing in the countries where they had come from. Did that ever happen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it did. I'm
Yeah.
sure it did. I can't remember specific examples. I mean, there's a film about the Maori, Troilus and Cressida, but that was a kind of feature film documentary thing.
Right.
Yeah, no, this did happen. A better person to talk to is Choi Yi Chung at the Globe.
Okay.
Because she's the whatever she is at the Globe, digital film distribution manager. She was in my time.
Right.
She will have a history, an exact history of how the films have been distributed around the world. And yes, now and again, TV companies from the countries did come and say, "Can we show the film?" That did happen.
Yeah.
But Choyi would have the specifics.
Well, I'm just interested because, I mean, again, this is a bit before all of the NT Live and, streaming from the RSC, and everybody was doing it. And now, of course, when in lockdown, we're getting access to all of these films. And obviously, the big producers of like Digital Theatre and various other ones, that there are more sites available where you can download performance. But again, I think, teaching from those resources is something that's relatively new. And again, people are being thrust into this environment. So I guess just before we leave the Globe to Globe, because I want to move on to the Hamlet one as well. Um, in terms of the audiences that were at those productions, I mean, I think one of the things that, I saw you almost on a daily basis, then that was, striking was how different they were from each other, and that
Yeah.
it wasn't the same group of people. So those Olympians came to everything,
Yeah.
a handful of people, but they were Globe people. They weren't necessarily,
Correct.
interested in those different audiences, but the rest of the audience was hugely different from one show to the next.
Yeah, and often it was kind of driven by the communities that were relevant to the plays. Sometimes the embassy of the relevant country took a kind of ownership over who the audience would be,
Right.
the live audience would be, um, and I think really, I mean, we didn't ever quite know exactly, but I think often the embassy bought a lot of tickets and
Okay.
distributed those tickets amongst people they wished to ingratiate themselves with, or as a kind of soft power thing. Um, um,
As a
and I
audience
remember, like,
experience, yeah, I was just going to say that I mean, the seats that you gave me were sort of beautifully in the first gallery, so I could see the entire audience, but I could also sorry, I could see the audience in the pit, but I could also see the audience in the galleries and the stage. And it was probably the most early modern theater experience I've had, because you invariably had the dignitaries in those boxes at the side, who were very much there
yeah,
to be seen,
yeah,
and everybody in the audience
yeah,
knew who they were. I never knew who they were, but it was, yeah, there was a kind of very sort of ceremonial element to the whole thing.
yeah. That's right. There were culture ministers, and of the countries, because it was a big deal. This is why it
Yeah,
worked. Actually, it was a big
yeah,
deal. It was a big deal for almost everyone to come. Um,
yeah,
Even the sort of big state Russian theatres and national theatres from a few places. It was a big deal to be part of this. And yeah, I remember, for example, Measure for Measure, when the Vektangoff did Measure for Measure in the evening.
mm,
That felt like a real Moscow theatre crowd.
yeah.
That was very.
Severe, as I recall. They were very, very
I thought there was quite
serious.
a lot of money on show, but
Mm,
that was probably just my me projecting onto them. But yeah, it felt sort of, yeah, like the kind of audience you would have seen at the Vakhtangov
yeah,
in Moscow if the show was happening at that time.
yeah. And that's the other thing I really liked about it, is that it wasn't, I mean, it acknowledged that those communities were in London as well, because you'd hear some, people having this intense conversation, whatever language it was, but then they turn around and have an equally intense conversation in English. It wasn't that they were,
Yeah,
they were not unilingual, these people, most of the
no,
people that I saw.
no, but that was the absolute starting point and building block for the whole thing, and that's how
Yeah.
we chose the languages. I mean, that really is that. I think we had 3 different criteria for choosing the countries, but I mean, a London language which just felt absolutely key. And
Yeah.
I think that London was changing. London was changing very, very fast. And
Mm,
for example, we actually chose a Lithuanian show because of Lithuania, despite being a tiny country, having a pretty amazing and unique relationship with Shakespeare.
yeah.
Um, but then, actually, you know, by 2012, there was a huge amount of Lithuanian immigration into London
Yeah.
after Lithuania joined the EU, whenever it had, 2004,
Yeah.
possibly.
Yeah.
So yeah, we sort of inadvertently stumbled upon a few sort of big communities as well.
Yeah, and as a kind of expat myself, it was there were a lot of in jokes for expats, if you know what I mean, being part of
Yeah,
the community, not part of the community,
yeah,
and
yeah.
all of that worked extremely well, I thought. So, moving on to the Hamlet, which is, again, one the opposite, I guess, and one production going to, what was it? Was it 209 countries? It was a lot of countries.
197, I think, in the end.
197 in the end. Okay. Was it a return? Was it an inversion in the sense that you went back to the places that came to you, or was it a wholly new identity? A different project starting from scratch.
it wouldn't have happened without the first one. I mean, it was the other
Okay.
side of the coin, really. I mean, it really happened because we got. I mean, as always happens at theatre festivals, everyone said, "Oh, you must come back and do a show at ours,"
Right.
and there was that genuine desire for cultural exchange that wasn't created by a cultural ministry
Right.
or anything apart from being in a bar together, and wanting to know about each other's ways of working. And I think we may have started thinking, oh, could we do a tour of our show to the places that have been in the festival?
Right.
In fact, I'm pretty sure that idea was getting thrown around at one point.
Okay.
And at that time at the Globe, it was just like no idea was mad. No idea was too mad. And we were allowed to throw around the most absolutely wild, ambitious ideas. And the Globe at the time and still now. I mean, credit to Neil Constable and the board of the Globe, because they went with this, and these were no one had
Risky
ever
things
tried
to do.
anything like this, and
No.
risky. But I think they reflected well on the Globe and brought and gave people a different idea of what the Globe was, and actually increased the Globe's potential for audience back home,
Yeah.
but by increasing its international profile. And if what I've just read is true, that a third of the Globe's audience is still from abroad, then that certainly helped bolster
Wow.
that.
Yeah.
I think that so one wouldn't have happened without the other. So we just it was, nothing was off limits at the time, and over a meal somewhere, sort of Dominic and I and the theatre department as a whole sort of
Said, let's do it.
made this idea come to life, and then there was, what was really interesting about the time was that it was never a conversation like the next morning. It was
Right.
never a conversation along the lines of,
Yeah.
are we really doing it? It was just,
Yeah.
you just went, we were going, go.
Oh, right. Right. Okay.
So yeah, that's pretty much it.
But the digital footprint of that, and I've heard you discuss it before, is very different because, it was just out there and you didn't conscientiously follow it. I mean, you had people coming and going and recording, sort of talking heads and things like that, but it wasn't like the space in that sense. So there must be a vast amount of
No.
digital material out there on that Hamlet.
Yeah, it's beautifully kind of democratic as opposed to the Hamlet, the way that Globe to Globe Festival is recorded. I mean, it's all the digital content is recorded on smartphone. I mean, technology had moved on even since
Yeah.
2012. You're
Yeah.
into like decent smartphones, and Instagram.
Yeah.
By that time, it had changed. And I mean, this thing there is to a sort of official cultural record of it is on the Google Cultural Institute page, which is where all these kind of people are doing gallery tours now. But if you type Globe to Globe Hamlet into that, there's a kind of exhibition of various props.
On the Google, sorry.
Google Cultural Institute.
Oh, I didn't know about that. Okay. And again, did they contact you, or is that something that happened after the fact?
It started happening during it, and Helena Mishasha, who was our sort of digital marketing person for touring, she met someone from Google, and it just started from that. And it's
I mean,
I could show you a little bit if
okay, sure, that'd be great. I mean, it's just interesting that the Globe being an old space, so old it's new again, is that it's having these collaborations with these cutting edge technical environments where you end up being, the first one to, create the space, one of the first people
Yeah,
probably on the Google Cultural
yeah,
Institutes.
yeah.
How do those two things marry, in your mind? Do you think that the digital technology, because in the space, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about, and it started with the Globe to Globe Festival using recording and lights and recorded sound and all of that in the Globe, which was very much against the original idea of it. So that that idea of sort of keeping the space pure in terms of live theater, and yet there's all of this digital innovation on the other side. How do you bring those two sides together? Or why do you think it's happened, I guess, is the question.
I mean, we were always kind of innovating digitally. I think we were. I think our Globe player generally was there before National Theatre Live, or certainly kind of around the same time,
Yeah.
and a little bit after digital theatre, I think. Um, but we it was just an environment where that was being pushed by Dominic,
Yeah.
and
It was that anything is possible kind of idea that
it was anything is
allowed.
possible kind of idea, and let's exist for everyone. It was about trying to be accessible and open and democratic. It was trying to fulfill a commercial imperative, and did. Not so much the Globe to Globe films, but selling Henry IV with Roger Alamin. That was a viable commercial opportunity. And then when you get to Twelfth Night with Mark Rylance, it's suddenly very, very viable, and we had the platform by that stage to do that.
Yeah.
And in the absence of subsidy, that was we were tasked a lot with finding alternative income streams. And
Well, and again, I guess that's the other question about, I'm interested in audiences, is the notion that the Globe is your audience, as it were. Your audience isn't just bound to those people who can come into the building. And they were ways of finding other audiences that you could share with. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And there's a massive kind of educational thing about the Globe, of course, and I think we sold a couple of subscriptions to the Globe Play to universities, maybe, or
Okay.
to school groups, or around the world. And that was yeah, as you say, that I mean, it's a brilliantly international place. It was. I mean, I can only talk for when I was there, but it was a brilliantly international place, and there was never this huge pressure because of the lack of subsidy. I think there was never this huge pressure to serve any particular community that we didn't feel we wanted to serve. And for
Okay.
us, between 2011, 12 and 2016, the community we chose to serve was the world. I mean, and that sounds really glib, but we just decided to be internationalist and to be kind of global in our outlook.
Well, it was
And we
also,
could have.
there were those celebration years, 2012, 2014, 2016. There were the birth and the death years as well. So there were these big international things happening.
Yeah, but they weren't international in and of themselves. We could have decided to have a celebration of the borough of Southwark, and we didn't.
And you didn't. So what happened with that Globe to Globe Hamlet, in the sense of, it's not on the Globe player, it's just out there in the world, right? And do you have any sense of, I mean, if the Hamlet tour was a result of the Globe to Globe, then what came out of the Hamlet tour, do you think? Was there anything that came?
Yeah.
Did that influence the future of the way you did things after that?
Yeah, I think. Well, we then did this mad thing called the Complete Walk, which was sort of
that.
combination of two ideas, where we filmed little clips of Shakespeare plays in each, pretty much in the locations where the plays are set.
Right.
On the whole.
Yeah.
And we had a walk from Tower Bridge to Westminster Bridge. I
did that one too. It's very cold. Very cold.
Yeah,
that day.
it was. And that, that in a way came out of Hamlet because, again, we'd been around and we'd found these locations, found these amazing places, and
it gives ownership as well, doesn't it? As opposed to the Globe as a site-specific place that everyone was excited to come to. Then people are able to take a bit of ownership of it when Cyprus or Venice or wherever it happens to be. I went to Verona, and of course they have Juliet's balcony.
They do,
and everybody goes there. So it is interesting the way that it's kind of retroactively created these places as part of the Shakespeare world.
Yeah, but I mean, Hamlet doesn't exist really online. I think that's part interesting.
But the other and because that was done with the BBC as well, wasn't it? The Complete Walk, or was it the Arts Council? It was one of the two, wasn't it?
It was. We got a huge amount of funding from someone.
Yeah, because then I think they are available somewhere. And again, it's
BBC Arts had a big pot of money to use on Shakespeare's death day, didn't they? In
2016.
And that's what we applied for and got with that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So again, I think that it was a really interesting experiment as well. And it was very busy on the day that I did it. It being sort of condensed in that way. So I mean, I have written about, talked about the fact that when the RSC did the complete works in 2006, it was this really big deal, and it took months and months and months. And then you boiled it down to 6 weeks, and then you boiled it down to doing it in a day. So again, some people would see that as reductionist, but it does it made people familiar with the whole canon, as opposed to just the big four plus the comedies, which is what a lot of people are most familiar with. So when did you move to York?
In December 2017, but I'd left the Globe in October, early October of 2017.
Okay, so your last thing, as it were, was the Complete Walk, or did you?
No, because I had lots of amazing times with Emma Rice between 2016 when the Complete War was on and the autumn of 2017 when I left. I mean that started with a big digital kaboom in a way, because we digitized the space itself, I suppose. And one key thing at the time that you've just mentioned is that we did it or not with light, but we did it with sound in Globe to Globe.
Yeah,
and no one cared, which is interesting, very very interesting, given how public the fallout about Emma was, and given how many people kind of chose to comment on it and chose to form an opinion that we had.
Well, and it may be because it was temporary and it was visitors and all that sort of thing. People turned a blind eye, but I don't know, I guess it was having the artistic director do it that upset people. Are you still there, Tom?
I am now.
Okay.
Sorry, you've just froze for a bit. I was just saying that yes, Emma decided as artistic director, but Dominic chose and agreed that we would put sound into Globe to Globe, and I think that was the right decision. And it's funny, isn't it? It's like if the foreigners do it, it's okay.
Very strange.
That's weird.
It is. So moving to York, how has those experiences at the Globe had an impact on what you've been doing there? And is there a digital element? And have you gone back to those space films at all? has it had a formative impact on the way you approach
No.
stuff? No.
No, I mean, it's just a completely different job here. It's just a completely and utterly different job, and I love it, and I'm excited by it. But the challenge could not be more different. I mean, at the Globe, because of what the Globe was, we were charged really with engaging the entire world, as you and I were just talking about before, or at least we took it upon ourselves to be internationalist and global wherever possible. Here my job is to engage a city and a very local community with theatre, and with what theatre can do for your well-being, with what theatre can do for your children's development, and how theatre can kind of form a community in certain ways. And
is there a digital element and a teaching element?
Yes,
in
there
that?
is now, but it's been the catalyst has been COVID-19.
Right.
More rather than a strategic aim to get to that. I think we now straight away we've gone, and maybe actually this is a little bit of a legacy of my work with the Globe, because I'm not scared of digital, I suppose.
No.
Because of what we did there. We've just made 5 new audio versions of the York Mystery Plays with the BBC, with kind of new sound design, which is wonderful. We've streamed a community play, Everything is Possible, about the suffragette movement in York. And we have, on BBC iPlayer, is Wise Children, filmed with us, which we co-produced. So there is with MRI. So there's a bit of digital output, but I would say that COVID's been the catalyst, and we've kind of scrambled to do it, like many others have, to keep in touch with our audience rather than anything else. What we will have to do now going forward is retain some of that, I think, and for various reasons to do with how we continue to engage with new demographics, and how we reach people in rural communities, and so on and so on. We'll need to sort of, I think it feels like digital will have to sort of become part of our new normal quickly. And it probably hasn't been up to now. That doesn't mean it hasn't been for the theatre before I was here. They were filming things and streaming things and distributing films.
And what about the theatre more broadly? How do you think it's going to cope after this crisis, and when do you think it's going to get back to any normal, let alone a new normal? Or is it going to be completely different, do you think, after all this?
I think it's I think it throws a gauntlet down to theatre to make absolutely sure that it's never being elitist. And I think the reason it does that is it is huge and awful tragedy as this whole pandemic has been. It does give the opportunity for every walk of life to stop, to kind of get off the treadmill and go, what are we doing? And it's well documented and understood by everyone who lots of people who engage with theatre, that we have to be more, we have to appeal to everybody more than we perhaps have.
It's a first principles moment, isn't it? It's a real reassessment, and saying, okay, what are we for? What can we get rid of? How do we pare down to the, I was talking about it as being reductionist, but that's one view. But the other way is saying that it's basic, it's fundamental. How do you go back to the what theatre is really about, and who it's for, and what it's for?
Exactly, and I think exactly. I think we're a lot of the time we're at the moment we're like, we must survive. Everyone's trying to survive.
Yeah.
Just trying to pull us back even sort of before that and go, well, why? Let's just articulate why we should survive.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's really useful as an exercise, because it makes you kind of review what you feel your mission is, what you feel your raison d'etre is.
Well,
And
I think you spend an awful lot of time saying it in different ways to different people through, marketing or through, grant applications or whatever, but it isn't necessarily thought through. It isn't,
no,
heartfelt. Whereas now I think it really will be. People are
and
really going to have
yeah,
to articulate that.
and there hasn't been the moment of jeopardy. There hasn't been
Yeah.
the moment of real jeopardy, and
Yeah.
now it's 100% here, and we have to be really careful, I think, not to be like wishy-washy, unspecific, glib with what we say. I think that's really, really crucial. It's not all right just to say. You have to. I think we really have to make the case and explain to people why their lives, their well-being, their children's emotional development, by all sorts of things, can be ameliorated by live performance. So yeah,
We're
we're
going to
just
need it more
taking.
than ever, really, aren't we,
We're
at
going
the
to
end of
need it
this?
more than ever, because we are going to be kind of atomized, aren't we?
Yeah.
And we need to get back together so that we are in positions as groups of society and as communities where we collectively agree on things. And in a theatre, an audience doesn't necessarily collectively agree, but it forms a collective view. It's in a room together and it forms a collective view. And there are those amazing stats from UCL about hearts beating at the same rate when they're in a theatre, when a single audience is in a theatre, which I just love.
Yeah.
And it
Well,
feels like,
and the church isn't filling that role, or it always used to, but it isn't in the same way that it did. And so there, people have to find other places where they're coming together, even if
mm,
it's Joe Wicks, everybody breathing at the same time.
mm,
That idea of communion,
mm,
community,
mm,
everybody coming together, and as you say, if not necessarily agreeing on everything, agreeing to disagree together.
yeah.
Okay, well, that's us putting the world to rights. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you.
It's very kind of you.